Chapter 5 The Ghost of Pokemon Tower. G'day everyone, Rune here, and this is Chapter 5 of my What If Ash Became a Pokemon Ranger series. For those of you that are new to this story, there's a link in the description below to the playlist. Now let's begin the next chapter. Finally arriving in Puerto Vista, our group of heroes are sadly too late to catch the early boat to the mainland, and so are stuck at port until the next boat arrives in 3 hours. While they're sitting at the dock, Misty spots a horsey which she points out to the boys. Ash notices that the horsey is hurt and is about to start digging through his bag when the horsey begins to make a picture in the water with its ink. Looking at it, Gary recognizes the squid-like shape and asks Ash if he's heard of any tentacool and tentacruel colonies in the area. However, before Ash can respond, they hear an explosion and turn to see a boat on fire with sailors jumping off to escape the flames. After saving the sailors, they are brought to the boss, Nastina, who then tells them of her resort and how the tentacool are hindering its construction. She asks if the 3 would be willing to exterminate the tentacool for her. When Misty is about to start shouting at Nastina, Ash quickly covers her mouth and gives Nastina a polite smile. He tells her that her offer is tempting, but they need a little time to evaluate if this is a task that they can handle. He asks her to wait until tomorrow for their answer. Charmed at Ash's manners, Nastina agrees. Before either of his friends can protest, Ash drags them out of the room and into the streets. Once he releases her, Misty turns on Ash angrily, demanding to know why Ash would cover her mouth like that and why he would even consider that woman's offer. She's cut off mid-sentence, however, when Ash holds up his hand in a one-moment gesture. He then turns to Gary and asks if he can borrow the poker gear for a minute. Confused, Gary hands it over. As soon as it's in his hand, Ash flips it open and punches in a series of numbers before holding it to his ear. After a few seconds, Gary and Misty could hear a faint voice on the other end. Hello, this is the Kanto Pokemon Ranger Outpost. How may I help you today? Hello, I'd like to report an urgent case of environmental vandalism and Pokemon endangerment in Puerto Vista. After explaining the situation to the receptionist, Ash hands the phone back to Gary. Misty stares at Ash, now realizing what he was up to. He'd asked Nastina to wait until tomorrow to buy time for the Rangers to arrive. She admits that that's a very smart move, but Ash points out that they still have work to do. If Nastina has been sending workers out there despite the tentacool all this time, then it stands to reason that she'd still be sending them out there now. They need to prevent the workers from going out there, not only because they'd be continuing the damage Nastina has caused, but they'd be putting themselves at risk. From there, it's a long montage of our heroes finding comedic ways to prevent the workers from trying to reach the construction site. A few hours later, a man wearing a Pokemon Ranger uniform emerges from the ocean right next to where our heroes are taking a breather. He asks if they're the ones that raised the alarm on the construction site. Upon receiving confirmation, he slaps Ash on the back hard, nearly knocking him over. The ranger then explains that with all the evidence that he's been able to gather from investigating the reef, he not only has enough to shut the construction down, but also to put Nastina away for a long time. He also says that it's a good thing Ash called them when he did. The Tentacool and Tentacruel were extremely agitated while he was down there, and seemed to be preparing for something. If the situation had been left for any longer, the Pokemon might have done something drastic. After watching Nastina get arrested, the next boat to the mainland finally arrives. Hopping aboard, they enjoy a peaceful trip to the port just outside of Lavender town. Upon arriving at the port, Ash immediately asks if they can take a quick detour to Lavender town before continuing on to Celadon for Gary's next badge. Curious, Misty asks why he wants to go there, while Gary rolls his eyes with a smile, already knowing why Ash wants to go there. Ash explains to Misty that Lavender Town is the home of Mr. Fuji, a man well known within certain circles as a great humanitarian. He runs a home for injured and abandoned Pokemon called the Pokemon House. Ash has always wanted to see the place and meet the man that has done so much for wild Pokemon. Seeing how much this means to him, his friends easily agree and the 3 of them head off to Lavender Town. Upon arriving, the group make an immediate beeline to Pokemon House. where they are greeted by a red-haired girl who introduces herself as Reina. The group introduces themselves and asks if Mr. Fuji is in. Reina explains that he's stepped out for a few hours, but they're welcome to stay and wait for him. She even offers to give them a tour of the facility while they wait. Walking around the house, Reina explains the different facilities and programs that the Pokemon House runs in order to help the wild Pokemon in their care. While walking them through the room where the Pokemon sleep, Reina explains about the house's volunteer program, pointing out two of their newest volunteers, who decided to help out on their way through town. A woman with magenta hair tied up in a long braid with glasses, and a man with short blue hair and a beard. They're accompanied by their Meowth, who's wearing a red collar with a bell and is currently playing with some of the Pokemon. She tries to get them to come over to talk to the guests, but they hastily explain that they're a little busy at the moment, so maybe later. While looking at all the Pokemon in the room, Ash's eye is drawn to a baby Cubone standing in the corner of one of the sleeping pens. He's watching the three newcomers with suspicious eyes, holding his bone club as though in preparation for an attack. Not taking his eyes off the baby, Ash asks Reina why the Cubone looks so guarded. Sadly, Reina explains that Cubone lost his mother in an attack by Team Rocket. Ever since, he's been afraid of everyone that isn't Mr. Fuji. Ash, Gary, and Misty all share a look, wondering if this was Rocket looking for more test subjects for their experiments. Before anyone can say anything, Crystal and Luster leap from their partner's shoulders and into the pen, and walk up to Cubone, startling the humans watching, including the new volunteers. Cubone raises his club, looking like he's preparing for an attack. But Crystal and Luster simply smile and give a few soft yips. After a few moments of this, Cubone lowers his club and Crystal and Luster move in closer to nuzzle him. At Reina's startled reaction, Ash explains that Crystal and Luster are also victims of Team Rocket. He then explains how they came to meet the two Pokemon, and that he, Misty, and Gary have been trying to find out what Rocket is planning so they can stop them. It's at this point that a man bursts into the room, proclaiming that he has bad news. He tells everyone in the room that he heard from one of the Gravekeepers that he had seen Mr. Fuji entering the Pokemon Tower not long ago. Confused, Gary asks why that's a problem, as last he heard, the tower was open to everyone. Reina explains that that's how it's supposed to be, but a few days ago, some members of Team Rocket stormed into town and claimed Pokemon Tower as their base. No one's been allowed in ever since. It's at this point that one of the other volunteers pipes up, saying that a ghost has started haunting the floor just below the floor where Team Rocket hangs out. Looking at each other, Ash, Gary, and Misty share a look, each of them thinking the same thing. In unison, they give a nod of agreement before Ash and Gary call over their partners. Startled, Reina asks what they're doing. Turning to her, the three of them grin. "What do you think? We're going to rescue Mr. Fuji and show Team Rocket the door." This declaration shocks all of the adults in the room, who immediately start trying to talk them out of it. They're just children. Some of the adults in town attempted to challenge Team Rocket, but they failed. What hope did they have? Misty grins and explains that she's one of the 4 gym leaders of Celadon, alongside her sisters. Gary shows them his gym badges and explains that he's pretty confident in both his and his Pokemon's skills. Ash says that as an aspiring Pokemon Ranger, he can't just stand by and do nothing. Team Rocket has hurt too many people and Pokemon as is. If there's even a chance that he can do something to stop them, that's a chance he's going to take. Their minds made up, they make their way to Pokemon Tower. Meanwhile, the new volunteers sneak out the back with their Meowth. Once they are out of sight, they remove their disguises, leaving them in their plain Rocket uniforms. Looking at each other, they begin to discuss everything they've just heard. If what the twerps and that girl Reina said is true, then it certainly explains a lot. Like why the twerps seem to be holding a grudge against them. They sit in silence for a long moment, contemplating the possibility. The story about Cubone's mother and the supposed experimentation on the twerps' Pokemon settling uncomfortably in their guts. Sure, they're crooks, but murder and experimentation on Pokemon? That's a bridge too far. Surely Rocket wasn't actually guilty of those things, right? This had to be a case of mistaken identity. right? The three look at each other, the uncertainty evident in their expressions. They need to know. They need to know if Team Rocket was behind all of that. Nodding in silent agreement, the three begin to make their way to Saffron City. When Ash, Gary, and Misty arrive at the entrance to the Pokemon Tower, it's already dark, giving the tower an eerie feeling. While Misty hesitates, intimidated by the dark tower, and Ash tries to reassure her, Gary, completely oblivious, walks right through the doors, leaving Ash and Misty to scramble after him. Entering the tower, they begin to make their way up. With Team Rocket and the Ghost having chased off anyone that tried to enter in the past, the trip is very quiet, adding to everyone's nerves. Not helping is the fact that they keep catching a glimpse of a shadow out the corner of their eyes, but whenever one of them goes to look, it's gone. Meanwhile, back at the Pokemon house, Cubone is tackling the door to his pen, trying to break out. Raina, worried about what could have gotten Cubone so worked up, tries to check on him, only for Cubone to break out of his pen as soon as the gate is unlatched. Panicking, Raina takes off after Cubone, who seems to be heading for Pokemon Tower. Soon, a group of heroes arrive at the floor just below Team Rocket's base. As they make their way to the final staircase, a massive purple-black smoke manifests in front of the stairs. The group of three freeze in shock as a haunting voice tells them to leave. Taking a nervous step back, Misty looks at Ash and Gary, asking if they have a plan. Gritting his teeth, Gary tells his friends to head for the staircase while he distracts the ghost. Ash protests, not wanting to leave his best friend alone with a being beyond understanding. But Gary insists, telling Ash that their mission is to rescue Mr. Fuji, playing into Ash's ranger mentality. Reluctantly, Ash nods, and he and Misty make their way to the stairs, while Gary tries to fight the ghost. Making their way up the stairs, Ash and Misty are soon confronted by a Team Rocket grunt. Relieved to be facing a human instead of a ghost, Misty sends out Starmie while Ash calls on Crystal. Working together, they are able to hold their own against the grunts Drowsy and Golbat. But after a few minutes with no decisive victory, a new voice is added to the fray and a small yellow form plunges into Golbat and Drowsy. Before the grunt can react, a shadowed figure springs up behind him. In a blur of motion, something strikes the grunt in the back of the head, knocking him out and making him drop a strange device he was carrying. Ash and Misty tense with their Pokemon, not sure if this new entity is friend or foe. Crouching down, the figure picks up the device the grunt had dropped, before walking into the light, revealing herself to be a girl about their age, with long brown hair and wearing a black dress and white gloves. The little creature with her is revealed to be a Pikachu, which is now sitting on her shoulder with a big smile. Smiling, the girl introduces herself as Green, and explains that she'd come here to investigate why Team Rocket had taken over the tower. She says that she's glad to see that there are more trainers willing to stand up to Rocket aside from her. She then hands them the device she'd picked up and suggests that they give it to their friend downstairs, before walking past them. When Ash and Misty turn around, she's completely disappeared. Rushing back down the stairs, they arrive to see Gary and Lester struggling to do anything against the ghost. Remembering what Green had said, Ash calls out to Gary before throwing him the strange device. Looking at the goggle-like contraption, Gary slips the device on and is shocked at what he sees. A ghostly spectre of a female Marowak. The moment he says this to Ash and Misty, the dark smoke dissipates as though broken by a spell, revealing the ghost to Ash and Misty as well. Standing her ground, Marowak continues to tell them to leave before they get them too. At this moment, the baby Cubone arrives with Raina close behind. Seeing her child, Marowak embraces him tenderly. Pulling the device off his head, Gary calls Luster back. There's no point in continuing the fight. Marowak had just been trying to protect everyone, scaring them away so they couldn't be hurt by Team Rocket. Approaching Marowak and Cubone, Ash tells the mother that she doesn't need to protect them. He and his friends came here to make Rocket leave, and he's sure that they're strong enough to do it. So Marowak doesn't need to worry. Everyone will be safe soon. With their spirits set at ease, Marowak fades away with a grateful nod. Walking back up the stairs, our group of heroes, now accompanied by Raina and Cubone, all confront the 3 rocket grunts stationed there, including the one that had been knocked out earlier. Hearing the men talking about something called a sylph scope, Gary tosses the device Ash and Misty had given him at their feet, asking if this is what they're looking for. Startled and confused, the grunts ask who they are, unable to see them clearly in the gloom. "We're the ones that are about to kick you creeps out of here!" Angered by the challenge, the grunts each send out one of their Pokemon, those being Coughing, Golbat, and Raticate, while our heroes do the same, with Misty sending out Clefairy, Ash calling on Crystal, and Gary calling on Nen. While Crystal attempts to hit Golbat with a rock throw, Nen tries to take on Coughing with a water gun, and Clefairy tries to take on Raticate. While Crystal's attack hits and knocks out the Golbat, Clefairy is shoved away and into Crystal by the Raticate, sending them both sprawling. Meanwhile, Nen is forced to abort his attack when Coffee throws a sludge bomb at him. Wanting to hinder all 3 of the opposing Pokemon, the grunt tells his Coughing to use Smog, forcing our heroes on the defensive as they desperately dodge the attacks. As our heroes are trying to think of a plan, Cubone throws his bone at the poisonous smoke, dissipating it. Seizing on the opportunity that Cubone just gave them, Clefairy uses Life Dew to heal everyone, before Crystal and Nen combine their Rock Throw and Water Pulse into a Water Pulse infused with small rocks. Just as the Pokemon are about to evade, Nen evolves into War Turtle, further increasing the attack's power and knocking both Raticate and Coughing out. Thanks to the light of evolution temporarily lighting up the room, the grunts were able to see that their opponents were children that they just lost to. Furious, but knowing that they're outclassed, the grunts make a hasty retreat while swearing revenge. Yeah, like we haven't heard that one before. And that, everyone, is where I'm going to leave the story for now. Join me next time as our heroes receive special gifts, meet a man in need of help, and gain another ally. I'm Rune. See you next chapter.